Welcome to Pollen Weather by Pollen Wise. For most of the country, you're right in the middle of grass season. In the south, things are starting to taper off a little bit, and you're seeing some weeds as well. In the north, the tree season, which is spring mostly, is tapering off, and you're getting grasses coming on. Let's take a look at the national forecast. These are peak concentrations forecasted for today. Most of the country is in orange and yellow, which is pretty darn good considering we're forecasting the peak hour for the day. Southern Idaho, central, south Arizona, central Texas, and northeastern Iowa are the only places where we're predicting a very high condition for pollen. And we've even got a green over there in South Carolina, which is pretty nice. They've had a long and hard tree season, and also grass season has been quite arduous down there. So it's nice to see things clearing up a little bit. Let's look at mold. And our mold map is going to be using a different color scheme. So the darker green means higher mold conditions. Most of the country is reasonable as well, and things are really starting to dry out, which usually means that mold levels are going to subside. That's not to say that the eastern half of the U.S. and maybe the Bay Area with intermittent rains are not going to see more high mold levels this year. They definitely will, and especially as fall precipitation starts in some regions. Also, the Pacific Northwest needs to watch out for mold in general this year, but for much of the West, once things dry out, mold levels are basically gone for quite a while. Let's overlay precipitation on the daily pollen forecast. And what I'm about to say here definitely applies to mold as well. We've got storm systems in the upper half of the Midwest and the mid-Atlantic states, and those precipitation events are definitely going to push mold and pollen levels down. If you don't get the precipitation, then your levels could soar. Otherwise, things are generally quiet across the country compared to what we've seen so far this year. Let's look at the air quality in general, and this is air quality from Purple Air. There's in the Intermountain West, in the lower half, there's some fires that are creating some air quality issues, and then there's some spotty air quality issues across the urban locations all around the country. The Midwest is starting to look bad, and there might be some inversion system along the lower half of the Midwest that is creating some levels. And if that doesn't clean out, if that high pressure system doesn't leave, then that could continue to worsen. Some of the cool temperatures are starting to push out today, and if you're looking at today's forecast from the Weather Channel, Northwest still has those mild temperatures, but the rest of the country is really starting to look quite seasonal here. The last thing I want to do is plug our Pollen Wise app, which is the place to get hourly pollen counts. Here's a look at Las Vegas, the last 24 hours, and if you go to an allergist, they'll typically tell you pollen is going to peak sometime between 10 and 2, maybe 10 and 4 at the latest, and grass pollen tends to peak a little bit earlier than the rest. So Las Vegas here, we're looking at a pretty typical situation where the pollen is peaking around midday. Here's another location, Waterloo, Iowa, where yesterday in the last 24 hours, if you're looking at the peak was more towards the evening. And this can happen anywhere in the country. It can peak at any time depending on weather systems and the maturation of the pollen and a bunch of other processes that we'll continue to talk about here on this channel. Point here is download the Pollen Wise app and keep track of your hourly pollen counts so that you can be warned and plan your day. Thanks.